There are 3 methods that can be used for pattern drafting, and those methods are after you have marked all your sections here, you will trace off each individual section, and that's what we're going to do in this video. The other method would be to drape your fabric on to your doll, and the third method would be flat pattern drafting on paper, where you will take your measurements and use rulers to draft out your pattern. Okay, so to get started on this particular method, what you're going to do is you need to find the halfway point between the center front and the side seam for the waist. The center front and the side seam for the high hip, and the center front to the side seam for the full hips. And the same on the back. You will need to mark, and I'm not sure if you can see my marks, you will need to mark from the center back to the side. You'll need that halfway point, and I think you can kind of see my mark right there. You'll need from the center back to the side seam, you'll need that halfway point. Let me see if I can see how I've marked it in black right there. And then you'll need on the hip, full hips, you'll need the center back to the side seam. You'll need that halfway point, which is right there. You can see the mark. Okay, so I've done the front, and I've got my string keeps going all crazy here, but that is my halfway point marked on the waist, the high hip, and the hip, where that string is coming down. Okay, and the reason why we have to section this off like this is actually where your darts would be if you were draping or flat pattern drafting. Okay, but the reason why we have to have that is because when we section and trace this off, this is basically what we're going to be doing. We're going to be tracing it. Okay, it has to be able to, your plastic has to be able to lie flat enough to be able to get the markings. Okay, so grab yourself some clear plastic. Okay, make sure that you can either use a ballpoint pen. I like to use a marker, a Sharpie marker, because the markings transfer really easy. And so, okay, can you see the little area right here from the waist, the center front, down to the high hip, and then that's where it splits the section in half over to the side seam? So what you're going to do is you're going to just take that plastic and put it on your doll and line up your thread. Take your marker and just mark that area. Okay, on this one I was able to get 2 sections. I was able to get the next area, which is the high hip. See this section right here? I was able to get the high hip to the center front to the full hips, and that halfway point right there from the center front to the side seam. So I just line up that first section, get that on my girl, and take my marker and trace that part out. Now for the next sections I wasn't able to get it, so I had to get a new piece. I had to get a new piece of plastic here. Okay, and I copied off the next section over from the hip, the side seam of the hip there, to the full hips. Up here is the high hip, and this line right here is that center piece. Okay, and I got that marking. And then I was able to, this was the hardest one to get. I was able to grab this marking right here from that center between the waist and the high hips. That's the waist line at the top. Right here is the high hip. And over here, I had to come make a marking on my waistline, which I use the seam on the doll. She's got like this seam separation where the factory has her actually, you know, cut in two. So I knew that that was exactly where her center of her waist mark was. So that's what I used right there. And then this little marking right here is joining, it's coming down on her hip area. Okay, so once I got all those markings, so that's the marking that I was just showing you. Once I got all that, I had to copy them all. Okay, so this is what my end result was right there. Okay, and I took my plastic and I just traced. I was able to trace this. Trace that for the center front to the middle. Again, this is where your dart would be if you were flat pattern drafting. Here's the high hip area and the hip area. Okay, and then I had to trace the rest of it. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay, there's the bottom. And that right there was the hip area. So I traced that section, okay, right there. And then that's the area on the waist. Let me find that one here. That would be right. That would be that right there. Okay. And I just put it all together. And it might look a little weird. I'm hoping you can see this good enough on video. But okay, that's the waist area right there. And then I lined it up to the center where like your darts would be. I'm having a hard time lining this up to show you. Okay, there you go. There you go. Okay. And I traced that part off. Okay. And then, once I had all that traced, then I had to get, let me put a white piece of paper behind here so you can see it better. Okay. Then I had to get my side seam and the front seam coming down the skirt, and then I just kind of drew in, you know, angled it. So what I'm talking about the side seam is this right here. I had to get from the waist down to her knee for her skirt, and from the waist down to her knee in the front right there. Okay, and I just so that's the side seam, that's the front seam, and I had to draw in don't mind that first line across there. The correct one is actually here, and you'll actually go and take rulers later on and you'll straighten out all these lines because it's all a little wavy and wonky right now. But anyway, so in doing so, that is your front skirt pattern right there. And one thing that you can really notice is, can you see the difference in the front length versus the hip and side seam length right there? There's a big difference in that. That's why we take the measurement on the side from the waist to the hips, and we take the measurement from the waist down to the knee. Normally, when you go to hem something, you will usually go from the bottom up. So you'd have some type of ruler, and you'd actually find a spot on the ruler, like if you wanted it, you know, let's say 2 inches from the ground, you would mark the skirt all the way around. But you can also measure it from the top down, which is what we did. Okay, so that is how you do this, where you actually take, you know, those little squares that you're making with these little squared off sections. Again, don't mind this, it keeps bending. There we go. So you would just take these little squared out sections and just copy them, and that will give you your pattern. So this is one way of making the pattern. Okay, so here's the front. My strings are not taped down, so they keep moving on me. But here's the front pattern, and you will do the exact same thing for the back pattern. You will just mark off each section. Now for her, I need to get that center string coming down, but you will do the exact same thing. You will just copy each section and put it together, and then get your side seam and your back length. Okay? All right. That's it for today, and next we'll show you, the next thing we'll show you is how to do this with draping some fabric.